Well, as a lawyer, how do you see the battle shaping up between the state of California and the Federal Department of Justice over SB 54, the sanctuary state bill that was passed into law last year? I mean, do you see obviously it's not only a political fight and it's being used as a political fight, but it does have repercussions, and sometimes the state party will do stuff that is not a good look in the North. We see that in gun control bills and stuff like this, but we almost kind of lay it up there for the Republicans to take and use against us. But obviously, there's some parts of this bill that are giving some people some heartache on the far right, and it's being used. But how do you see the legal fight shaping up as far as the federal versus the state?
I think legally, what will happen is nothing. It's a political fight. You talk about it being a political fight, and it is. And you've got politicians in some of the areas in Los Angeles and San Francisco, pushing for sanctuary status and pushing the bill because it's great politics there. And then you've got people outside those areas pushing against it because it's great politics there. The truth of the matter is, from a legal standpoint, the state has always, and most in the state, have always sort of been sanctuary cities. Very few law enforcement agencies have ever cooperated with ICE for a number of reasons. Number one, it's a pain. It's just not, you're going to have somebody from ICE come in, sit in your jail, have an office there, have a facility, determine who's got a hold or should have a hold. They just don't do that. Are you going to have somebody who's actually going to alert ICE every time a prisoner is released who may or may not be illegal? There's nobody to do that. There's nobody in that position. That's just not something they do. So, in all honesty, the way the system has worked for the most part is that we have most people who are undocumented, who are in jail, tend to, whenever they finish serving a misdemeanor sentence, they were released without a hold. Mm-hmm. ICE never came in. ICE was never notified. It just wasn't something we did. Now, we are seeing some, not a lot, but we are seeing some kickback from ICE in some areas where they are actually going into the jails and they are pulling people out with misdemeanors and whatever. But it's still not the prevalent thing. So, in all honesty, I think legally what will happen, you'll see it go back and forth. I don't think much will change.
And these communities in Southern California and Orange County in particular that are fighting so hard against SB 54. I mean, my understanding is that legally, and you can comment on this better than I'm sure, is that they really don't have a leg to stand on. I mean, it's a state law, and there's really not much that they can do about it. Is that pretty much accurate?
Pretty much. And again, it's political. I mean, everybody gets to take their stance. The city council gets to stand up and rant and rave and for their constituents, and nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. It's very little anybody can do. So I find it somewhat hypocritical to watch politicians get up and rant and rail on both sides, frankly, rant and rail on the issue, because in the end, it's going to continue to be the way it's been, with maybe some increase in oversight, which will then be followed by a Democratic administration, which will be less oversight. So we'll just keep kind of bouncing back and forth.
I want to ask you, I know Aaron's got a question too, but this is coming to me as we're talking here.
Sure.
I'm not sure that I understand the nature. Well, I understand it, but I'm not sure I understand it in reality how it plays out, the idea of the supremacy clause.
Oh.
And how it really does affect states' rights and how states can do things within the framework of a federal system, federalist system, how states can do things. I mean, in a sense, I understand kind of what Jeff Sessions is saying, that how can California make an SB 54 where those immigrants, if we feel like they're a threat to the United States, they can come into the country that way. Isn't the supremacy clause arguing against SB 54?
Let's take another issue, just to give you an example of how it works. Cannabis, legalization of cannabis.
Good question too, yeah.
Here we have a state, California, Colorado, Washington,
whatever,
who have allowed legalized cannabis for recreational use. It is against federal policy. Okay. Now, the way the supremacy clause at least is supposed to work is that at any point, the federal government could essentially come in and say, we are going to arrest somebody federally. We are going to, you're running a shop. We are going to arrest you because it's against federal law, and we're going to prosecute you in federal court. Okay? They can do that. In practicality, it rarely is going to happen. And in fact, what you've seen is you've seen actually in the Obama administration them passing, specifically on cannabis, passing regulations that has told the Justice Department, you're not going to do it. Okay? And the practical solution is, or the practical application is, it would be so terrible politically for the Justice Department to do that they're never going to do it, because you've got states that have voted it in, and it's just never going to happen. It would never be a smart thing politically. But yeah, the Supremacy Clause basically says they could if they wanted to.